But please kind of just remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and copy archived for future viewing. Could everybody mute themselves when not speaking, and then this will avoid any background noise or feedback when other members are speaking. And if you do wish to speak, can you please either put your hand up, the little yellow hand if possible, or your hand if that's not working, or use the chat function. I'm sure between myself and the officers we'll make sure everybody's picked up then. If anyone has any difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, can you either let myself or the Democratic officer know? And if you do have a webcam, then it might be beneficial to turn that off, as that will help them with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so at least you can hear and then be heard. I think it all depends how the weather is, which does seem to affect it all at the moment. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the committee meeting, the officers, and we do have a guest speaker with us tonight, who's Matthew Saul, who's going to help take us through the WellTag 2+ Dinners Powers Transport Study.
Apologies, Chair. It's Matthew Fry. It was my fault. I said Matthew Saul. It's Matthew Fry. Matthew Saul works for us.
Right. I do apologise, Matthew. It's Matthew Fry who's going to be joining us. Okay. So we'll move on to the first item, which is the apologies for absence. So do we have any?
Chair, everyone's present apart from Councillor Morgan. I've asked my colleague Mark Thomas to contact Councillor Morgan if he's had any problems connecting. So right. Other than that, we're all present. Okay,
that's lovely. Thank you very much. Item number 3 then, or item number 2, should I say, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th February. Are we happy to agree those minutes? Yes, lovely. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And then item number 3, which is to receive declarations of interest, including whipping declarations under the Council's Code of Conduct. So do we have any? No? Excellent. All right.
Chair.
Oh, yes.
Very sorry, Bronwyn. So I was just chewing a biscuit just when you said that. It might be worth mentioning, because on the Town Council, I've got that role as within the steering group for the bypass. Speaking on behalf of the Town Council, is just to make that plain. But I don't see that as being an issue in discussing this. It hasn't been in other meetings, but I'm just mentioning it for clarity.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item number 4 then, which is the WellTag 2+ Dinners Powers Transport Study. So I'll pass over to you, Emma, to start the ball rolling on this, and then obviously Matthew will come in then to take us forward with that presentation. So over to you, Emma.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Yes, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Good evening, committee. The report before you tonight is the Dinners Powers Transport Network WellTag Stage 2+ report. The report's been referred to you by Cabinet, and there are a number of recommendations on the report. And if I read those before we go through the presentation. So the 3 recommendations are that progress is noted on the study. The second recommendation is that, subject to Welsh Government providing local transport funding in 2021-22, the project is taken forward for the completion of a 12-week statutory public consultation. Prior to a decision being undertaken by the Vale Glamorgan Council to progress to any WellTag Stage 3 study. And the third recommendation there is that this matter is considered by yourselves, this committee, this evening. So that's just to remind you about those recommendations. What I'm going to do is quite a complex study. So what I've done is I've asked Matthew Fry from Arcadis, who's been our consultant on this, just to take you through a brief presentation, Chair and Committee. So hopefully that'll assist everybody to focus on what this report is about. So I'm going to hand over to Matt. Matt, would you like me? Oh, you're all right with the presentation. Brilliant. If you need me to do the presentation, I was gonna do it for you. So that's brilliant. So I'll just hand over to Matt. Matt, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to committee. Matt, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now, Emma? Is that okay?
Yeah, you were on mute.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Matt. I'll hand over to you. No problem.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you, Chair, for your time this evening. As Emma's mentioned, I'm Matthew Fry. I've been the project manager on this well-tagged project now since 2017. We've taken it forward through stage 1 and stage 2, and we've now arrived at what we've entitled a well-tagged stage 2+ study. So I'll spend some time this evening just taking you all through the work that we've been doing at stage 2+ and how we've got to this point. So as mentioned, we were originally commissioned back in 2017 to take forward a well-tagged stage 1 and 2 transport appraisal to consider transport improvements for the Dinas Powys area. The original options that we assessed at stage 2 were presented to the review group back in October 2018. And these are the 5 options that were considered. I'll run through in more detail again now as a recap, but in summary, we looked at several bypass options. The first was a green alignment, which was interconnecting on the A4055 from just south of the Mary Harrier to a point just south of Dinas Powys. The pink alignment was broadly the same route, just with the introduction of a roundabout midway through the route, interconnecting with Merch Road. On advice and recommendation by Dinas Powys Community Council, we also considered something called the blue alignment, which again interconnected a new bypass from just south of the Mary Harrier Junction to the B4267 Surrey Moors Road, Hayes Road roundabout. And then in addition to the 3 alignments, we considered a multimodal option, looking at public transport, rail, bus, walking and cycling improvements within the region. And then in addition, there was a combined bypass and multimodal option. And for the purposes of the assessment, we considered the green alignment for this study. So following presentation to the review group back in 2018, there were several recommendations that were considered by the review group that needed further consideration. So Arcadis was further commissioned to take forward the stage 2+ study to look at these tasks. On advice of Cabinet, again following completion of the Scrutiny Committee on the stage 2 report, the blue route was excluded from the analysis at well-tagged stage 2+. So we retained the green and the pink alignments. These are the 4 key tasks that we have been considering at well-tagged stage 2. The first one was to engage with Network Rail to understand further the constraints and potential costs associated with the construction of a bypass, given the proximity of the northern roundabout to the existing Cogan Railway Tunnel on the Vale of Glamorgan line. We were to take further concept design assessment of the Mary Harrier Junction for our second task, given the constraints and capacity constraints that are in existence at that junction. Once the task 1 and 2 were completed, we took forward some additional SUTA modelling, South East Wales Transport modelling, to consider the strategic impacts of the bypass on the local network, of which the output of that modelling fed into an updated economic appraisal of the green route, and the results of which I shall run through this evening. This is broadly speaking the study area that again has been retained since well-tagged stage 1, so extending from Barons Court Junction in the northeast through Dinas Powys on the A4055 to the southwest at Biglas roundabout. So why are improvements needed? This was considered as part of the stage 1 review, and primarily it was in relation to the high traffic flows that are experienced through Dinas Powys, leading to congestion, capacity issues at junctions, environmental impacts, air quality and noise pollution, as well as unreliable journey times. Residential land use development throughout the Vale of Glamorgan is likely to exacerbate these issues and put further pressure on public transport services, which are already overcrowded. Poor interchange facilities and public transport infrastructure throughout the Dinas Powys transport network, which to a large extent will be considered by the wider metro proposals being taken forward throughout the region. And in the do minimum scenario, which assumes no step change in funding, all of these issues would be exacerbated. These are the 5 core objectives that have been carried through as a part of the report for consistency. And again, these have been retained at WellTag Stage 2+. They are reviewed and they are considered by stakeholders as and when the opportunity arises, but these 5 core objectives have been taken forward, like I say, for continuity of the assessment. So in terms of the options, this is the green alignment, and in terms of a summary of this proposal, as you can see, the actual route, the bypass route, extends from a point just south of the Mary Harrier Junction in the north of this diagram to the east of Dinas Powys, and then it extends to a point just south of Dinas Powys on the A4055. It would be a 60-mile-per-hour road with an integral walking and cycling active travel link. And then the combination in terms of the assessment of the pink alignment is, broadly speaking, the same route, just with the introduction of the roundabout midway through the alignment, which would provide interconnectivity to the Merch Road in Dinas Powys. But again, this would retain a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit and that integral walking and cycling active travel link also. In terms of the costs of the proposal, I'll just come back there. See that, broadly speaking, the costs are quite similar. Both routes are around 3.5 kilometres in length, with the green route costing just over 46 million and the pink route costing just around 45.5 million. In terms of the multimodal option, this is really a combination of several options which accumulates to around £17 million in total, which encompasses bus enhancements, rail service enhancements and walking and cycling measures, as well as the addition of a park and ride facility at Brindon Park. In terms of the rail service and infrastructure enhancements, the actual cost of circa 17 million doesn't include any of these enhancements, as it would be assumed that Transport for Wales would take forward any upgrades to the network as part of the Metro budget and other funding streams as well. So in terms of the Stage 2+ tasks, this is the first task that we completed, which included engagement with Network Rail to consider the proximity of the northern roundabout in relation to an existing rail tunnel, Cogan Rail Tunnel. There were concerns at Stage 2 that there could be loading issues in terms of the proximity between the two structures, but following quite detailed consultation with Network Rail, it was considered that a structural assessment of the tunnel would not be required, as any increase in loading from the proposal can be considered negligible. So we've had that signed off by Network Rail, and we are satisfied that the location of that roundabout is suitable should this project be taken forward for further analysis. The second key task was development of more detailed design optioneering for the Mary Harrier Junction. Following the modelling work completed in Stage 2, it was identified that there would be stacking back of traffic from the Mary Harrier Junction onto the new bypass arrangement and the existing Cardiff Road highway also. So we were tasked with looking at potential improvements to the Mary Harrier Junction that could deliver enhanced capacity improvements at this junction. So to support this analysis, we actually identified a couple of options. This is option 1A. As you can see, the key item here is the removal of the Mary Harrier pub from the junction location to facilitate suitable room and space to provide additional lanes and lane widening to acquire the capacity required to achieve a suitable design at this location. So it's quite a significant change. On this particular arrangement, we have the 3 lanes approaching from the east and the 3 lanes approaching from the south. There's a right turn in all directions and left turn available in all directions. And this would be a signalised pedestrian crossing facilities also. Different with option 1B was that the right turn from eastbound heading westbound, shall we say, along Cardiff Road has been removed. This does actually have the impact of increasing capacity at the junction to make it more resilient, but you are then required to continue your journey southwards to the new roundabout and do a U-turn before heading back north to complete your manoeuvre. So we consulted with the Vale of Glamorgan Highways team, and it was considered actually option 1A would be a preferred arrangement for consideration as part of the traffic modelling. So option 1A is what we have taken forward as part of the SUTA modelling in our analysis. Once we had that design signed off by the Vale of Glamorgan Highways team, we engaged with Transport for Wales to complete the additional strategic modelling using the South East Wales transport model. These are the fundamental results that have come back in terms of the updated economic appraisal. And as you can see, the bypass green route does deliver beneficial BCR score of 2.01, which represents good value for money. We also completed a further sensitivity test following guidance from the Department for Transport, which actually is beginning to take into consideration the emerging impacts of COVID-19 on transport projects. So with that taken into account and possible reductions in traffic flows, increased potential costs of transport, public transport and so forth, the actual proposal still retains a positive BCR of 1.71. So a key element of the WellTag assessment is the transport case, and this is when we compare each of the options to a range of impacts to consider their viability. We include the do minimum scenario in this assessment as a core scenario from which we can base all the other, in this case, 4 options against that do minimum scenario. And as mentioned, the do minimum assumes there's no step change in funding to deliver a bypass or significant multimodal enhancements to the actual region itself. So in this instance, you can see the scoring, which actually ranges from a +3 to a -3 in terms of its effectiveness. Broadly speaking, there's positive social impacts that will be realised from each of the options, especially with regard to journey quality for introduction of the bypass route, as trips are taken away from Dinas Powys and Cardiff Road itself and diverted onto a new bypass. But there's also significant benefits in terms of security, access to employment and so forth for all of the options. There's a slight reduction in accidents, slight adverse impact on accidents, because the TUBA analysis, which is related to the economic appraisal, did assume a slight adverse cost of circa £4 million over the 60-year period in terms of a slight increase in accidents. Not necessarily to do with the bypass itself, but the strategic modelling is very much that. It's a regional model and it looks at the wider impacts in terms of accidents. So quite why there would be a slight adverse impact on accidents would need further exploration at the next stage of analysis to look at the devil in the detail, but we have scored that as a slight adverse at this point. But the actual new bypass would be designed obviously to current standards throughout. So in addition to cultural and social, with the environmental impacts and economic impacts, you can broadly see there that both bypass options have, broadly speaking, a negative impact on the environment, slightly counterbalanced by the multimodal options, given the shift from car use to public transport. And the bypass and multimodal option really consider the benefits and disbenefits of the combination of the green route and the multimodal option. Broadly speaking, though, there are positives in terms of the economic appraisal based on those BCR results that I just explained, and the cost benefits, just with that slight reduction in accidents that was identified in terms of cost. So in conclusion, the report has considered the strategic case, the transport case, as well as looking at the management commercial cases also, the financial cases. And it is considered at this stage, at the end of WellTag Stage 2+, that option D, the green route and multimodal, has merit in being taken forward for further consideration in the Stage 3 WellTag. The bypass appears to demonstrate good value for money. The pink route alternative may offer longer term strategic benefits, and we have added in our report that this is an option that may wish to be considered should the project be taken forward. Key junctions will continue to pose a strategic constraint. We've of course identified the potential benefits of improving the Mary Harrier junction, and that has been considered as part of our economic appraisal, but you do retain the issues and the capacity issues at Barons Court junction. Should the project again progress to stage 3, a full environmental impact assessment would be required, including further additional analysis of greenhouse gas emissions and the impacts on climate change and climate resilience. And of course, funding uncertainties remain a key risk to progression of the scheme, of course, at this stage. So in terms of the next steps from our perspective at Arcadis, it's of course consideration by the committee this evening, and then further consideration by the Vale of Glamorgan Cabinet following the completion of this meeting. So that's it, Emma. Back to yourself, and any questions, of course, happy to take any questions at this stage.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really helpful and really good presentation. And do you have anything to add on to what Matthew has been saying, or did you want to go straight to questions first?
I think straight to questions, Chair. Yeah. Obviously, if people have questions, that hopefully we can deal with those tonight, either myself or Matthew. Okay. Yeah, so no problem on that. Okay,
thank you. Well, just before we go into questions, we've all received that written statement from Rod Harrod. So we've all received that. We had it out, or we've had it via email. So I assume everybody's read that. Has anybody got any points or any that they want to raise about that? Before I got people's hands up for questions, but does anybody want to raise anything particularly around the written statement from Rod Harrod?
Yes, Chair. Can I pop in there?
Yes, okay.
I'm not sure that we need to discuss that. It's all about the blue route. We've dismissed the blue route and we're going forward with what we got. Thanks. I don't think there's much point talking about it personally.
No, that's fine.
I don't know. Maybe Emma wants to say something. I'm not sure, but that's my opinion, and I think I'm right. But
that's it. No, I just wanted to just check if anybody wanted to speak about it.
Chair, sorry, Emma. I think basically if we respond in a positive way to that message from Mr. Harrod, we'll be going back in time, and we'll be wasting an awful lot of time, effort and money and revisiting something which we've already decided against.
That's fine by me. Has anybody got anything else? Any comments around that before we go into questions? Emma, did you want to just come in there?
Just to say, obviously, I've considered Mr. Harrod's letter and correspondence, and my suggestion would be that should we receive funding from Welsh Government to progress the consultation exercise, the 12-week consultation exercise, that he could make those representations at that time, and we would consider those via the necessary process. So I would suggest that would be the right time for him to consider those for us to consider those questions.
Yeah. Okay. I assume we're all happy to agree to that then. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first speaker, which is Councillor Andy Robertson. Did you want to come in, Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, there's a number of things I wanted to ask. It arose at a community council meeting we had the other night in Dinas Powys. I was asked by Councillor Franks what the next stage was, and I said public consultation, and he said, but that will be dependent on funding from the Welsh Government. And I said, well, I don't think so, because public consultation, I would have thought, is part of the stage 2 report, and I find from the papers on this for this meeting that I might be wrong on that, and I don't understand why we are going for government funding from the Welsh Government for this public consultation. How could I ask how much the public consultation is expected to cost, and why we're applying to Welsh Government to cover that cost? I have other questions, but if you'd like to answer that question first, that's okay. Or do you want me to ask all my questions and then?
No, how do you want to? That's fine. Should we address that one first and then go into your other questions?
Do you want me to do that, Chair?
Yes,
yeah, would that be useful? So public consultation would be relatively expensive in the terms of my capital budgets that I've got for next year. So it's not something that I can afford to progress without the necessary support from Welsh Government. Now, the reason for the cost isn't necessarily just the online consultation, which it would be mainly through COVID. The reason for the additional cost is we're going to need specialist advice to assist with some of those the comments that are made. So, for example, if you take Mr. Harrod's comment that he's made today, that would take some technical time and technical response to be able to respond to that. So there will be a cost associated with that. Off the top of my head, and I can come back to you after the meeting if that would be useful, Councillor Robertson. I can't remember exactly what we've applied for, but we did apply when we applied for transport grant for that consultation and also to progress it to stage 3. So we are very dependent on receiving that money from Welsh Government, and consultation events aren't cheap. But I can give you a final cost separately. If I can find it while we're online, I will do that.
Thank you, Emma, for that. Are you telling me that you're applying for the money for the consultation as a lump with the stage 3 money, or are you applying for it separately just for the consultation and stage 3's a separate application? I can see I can see problems with the two being put together.
Yeah, so it's a dual application in that one application has been made, but obviously we need to get through the stage 2 first, so a stage 2 plus first, and if we then got on, then we've applied to go into stage 3, but it wouldn't be a full year stage 3, it would just be a partial year stage 3. But that, of course, that's all on the proviso, a bit like all applications, that one, members agree that they want to progress, having seen the consultation, and also the Welsh Government funding it. So it's a 2-part consultation. It is, I'm pretty sure it's available on the website, so I'll try and put that link through to you, because we have put the major funding bids onto the website, so you can see that, or I can send it to you separately if that's useful.
Thank you, Emma. Shall I ask another question now? Or
yes, Andy, if you want to ask the rest of your questions now. Okay,
well, the first one after that is I don't quite understand why it's thought that the impact of COVID-19 will bring the cost benefit down from 2.01 to 1.71. That's one question. I don't understand why for the pink route, where we are proposing a roundabout at the more or less adjacent to Merch Road, Merch Crescent, I don't understand why we're not considering a connection with Dinas Road and Lavenot Road from that roundabout to provide another exit for people in Penarth. I can understand people in Penarth thinking that the bypass isn't for them, but if that connection was considered and possibly implemented, then I think that would probably relieve an awful lot of traffic problems in Penarth. That's the next question. I'm a bit worried that we're not considering the impact on the use of electric cars in future. We seem to be very bogged down in emissions from petrol and diesel vehicles, whereas at some time in the not too distant future, I can see that, and this is government policy from Westminster, I believe, I can see that that will be much less of a problem. And finally, I wondered if there isn't an argument to be made. We've been talking about cost restraints and the lack of money, but I would have thought that coming out of COVID, that capital projects like the Dinas Powys bypass might actually be a considerable boost to the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Emma and Matthew, between you, do you want to answer those questions?
Yeah, Matt, do you mind taking the first few technical questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. And thank you, Andy. Thank you for the for your questions. Yes, in terms of the additional sensitivity analysis that was undertaken, which is including the emergence of, I guess, the COVID impacts, it's actually quite a broad range of variables that separate assumption has considered. I can provide more details of this as part of the formal response to this meeting, but it does include, for example, assumptions on reduced growth in forecast GDP per capita, for example. It does, I guess, to an extent, consider the emerging trends and impacts of electric vehicles as well, and the reduction in diesel sales and so on and so forth. So it's quite a varied and complex range of factors, and it takes a slightly more pessimistic view, certainly based on the results that we've had from the economic appraisal. But like I say, it's a combination of things which includes the COVID impact as well. It's not purely based on the COVID impacts itself. Hence a slightly lesser forecast in terms of economic performance as part of the sensitivity analysis itself. So is that okay, Andy, for the first question? I can say it's quite a range of variables, including COVID and the emerging. Of course, COVID remains in a state of flux. The impacts and the themes resulting from COVID are ongoing, and it's still settling, and there'll be a number of months, if not years, until we know the full consequences of COVID on the transport.
Thanks, Matt. I get that, but being a bit more optimistic in outlook, maybe I think there's going to be quite a bounce to the economy when we come out of once the vaccination's fully out and we come out of the lockdowns and everything. I think there's going to be a huge bounce. Personally, is there actually a mechanism for upgrading from 2.01 on the basis that we might have a terrific economic bounce?
Well, I guess you kind of got the counterbalance of the non-sensitivity test that we did, the 2.01 BCR that we identified. That's based on the current modelling and guidance issued by the Department for Transport in terms of the tuber analysis. So I guess at the moment that is showing the best case scenario. As with all our well tag assessments, things remain in a state of flux, things move on from year to year. But like I say, there was a requirement, or there's an increasing requirement for such well tag appraisals and web tag appraisals in England to consider the emerging threats and concerns from COVID-19, amongst other updates to the core variables within the actual model itself. So yeah, I guess in essence, the 2.01 is the best case scenario at this point in time. And the 1.71 BCR is the slightly reduced pessimistic, but still good value for money. In terms of anything over a score of 1 is good value for money.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. That's very helpful. Thank you.
In terms of the pink route alignment and the potential connection into Penarth, the key reason that's not included is that there's actually an existing ancient scheduled monument to the east of the roundabout. So it actually physically prevents an infrastructure connection off that roundabout to the east into Penarth. It was discussed as part of the original design development, hence why that's now omitted from the current design package itself. So it's actually a physical constraint in terms of that design itself.
Could I come back on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, basically, it's no secret. I did archaeology at university, and basically, I mean, that's what excavation's for. Rescue archaeology is all about where there's going to be a development or they want to put a road through. You can't stick a spade in anywhere in Great Britain without hitting archaeology. It's been that intensely occupied and lived in for millennia. So basically, I can't understand why there can't be an excavation arranged with the university or with one of the archaeological trusts. I don't really see that as a massive problem. It's not, I don't like to sort of quantify the value of archaeological sites, but it's actually not a hugely significant archaeological site.
Okay.
So can I just come back on that, Chair? Is that all right about the?
I mean, yeah.
When we met the review group with this report, there was a discussion about whether we should have the roundabout or whether we shouldn't. Sorry, whether we should have a junction or whether we shouldn't have a junction, and there was lots of discussion around that. So I think if we receive Welsh Government funding and we can go to consultation, and I've just put in the chat, it's £20,000 for the consultation, and the full bid is online, and I've given you the link there. If we do go forward, then obviously those are the sorts of discussions that we'd have within the community about what what benefits that might yield, and the possibilities of, as you say, digging up the monument and preserving it for future. So I think we're open-minded on that, and I think we want to hear what the community would say, subject to us receiving Welsh Government funding to actually progress to the next stage.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay.
Thanks, Emma. And the next point, I believe, was in relation to the emergence of electric cars on the network. And again, this, in terms of the report and the analysis itself, our analysis is reliant on the South East Wales transport model in terms of the traffic appraisal. That is the core model that we have based our analysis on. And that core model, which is retained by Transport for Wales, will be making these emerging assumptions as the model is updated on a frequent basis. So, for example, again, should this project be taken forward to stage 3, that would include further SUTM, South East Wales Transport Model analysis, in terms of the traffic analysis. And again, we would then be using the latest version of that SUTM model. Okay, just to alleviate any concerns.
Thank you, that's very helpful. That clarifies things. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I guess the last point was in terms of capital projects and the potential to support the, well, I guess in terms of the potential boom you mentioned there, was it Andy? What was the question again? Sorry, I scribbled my notes and can't read my own writing at this point. I've got.
Basically, in times of yore, when there've been massive recessions, or I mean, I thinking of America in the Great Depression, the way they got out of it was by capital projects, by actually sort of building roads and that sort of thing. So I mean, it comes across in the report that money is short. Now, I appreciate that local government and even national governments suffer from shortages of finance, but I can see that spending money on capital projects in the past has been a massive way out of recession, and I can see that doing projects like the Dinas Powys bypass could be a great assistance in that.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and certainly until such time that funding is approved for these kind of projects, we kind of maintain that risk-averse approach in the reports that taking things forward is subject to funding approval and so forth. But yeah, it's a point well made. There's every chance, isn't there, that it could create an opportunity for wider infrastructure enhancements to be considered by the decision makers. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed for bearing with me on all of that.
That's great. No, thank you. Thanks for the questions.
Okay, thank you, Andy. We're going to move on now to Councillor Vince Bailey. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions as well. Just the first one, I think, might be fairly straightforward to answer. I think it was on one of your slides where you're talking about access to employment and the measures. I think basically it was a +2 green on access to employment, and that was the same whether you just had the bypass or whether you had the multimodal, or if you had the bypass and multimodal. Now, given that having the bypass and multimodal implies improvements to both the transport infrastructure and the roads, I'm surprised that the impact is the same on access to employment by just taking one or other of those options. I think it's the slide before. Yeah. Is it this slide or is it the slide before? The slide before the environment one, I think.
Yeah, no, is it the social items, is it?
Yeah, so that's slide.
Yeah, access to employment is the same positive whether you go for just the roads, just the public transport, but then when you do both, which you'd think would increase capacity even more, it's still the same positive impact, which surprised me.
No, it's a fair question, and Yeah, and believe me when I say we pore over these tables and these scores in the office, because they are relatively subjective when we take the evidence base and we complete the transport appraisal itself. Whereas we also, whilst we also carry forth the benefits, we also might carry forth the disbenefits of any given impact as well, and we try and seek a balance within that. So, for example, if there are retained issues of adjunctions or capacity, for example, at Barron's Court, that would be a negative that we would pull through as well. So whilst you might think there'd be more of a benefit combining the multimodal with a bypass, we're quite mindful to bear in mind that there are items that are pulled through that could have an adverse impact as well. So it's kind of a balancing act, really, to be perfectly honest. And we try and be fair and reflective. So if we're just carrying forward benefits, which we think are significant, for example, with journey quality, they can be carried forward, and you might have that +3 when there's a combined option. If we feel there are adverse items being pulled through in terms of access to employment, we try and temper that with the overall scoring itself. I can delve back into a fair bit of detail in the transport case appraisal for each of the impacts, which is one of the appendices as well, if that might provide further clarification on that.
I mean, I kind of imagine from a layman's perspective that it might be as simple as, if you've got both, then some of the extra benefit will be split then between the two options. So some people will take the train and some people will drive. And so by not having the improved public transport, you're not encouraging people to use that, and vice versa. But I just wanted to check, because as with many of these things, it's quite a job to get your head around what you're looking at, the detail.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure, look, if there's a way of looking into it and you see anything else that's interesting you think we might find useful, perhaps email us after. But I understand why you can't immediately tell me now.
So it's quite a detail in terms of the transport case appraisals and the appendices. There's a lot of detail behind that summary table, and so it will all be in there. Our thoughts and our assumptions are laid out. So I can certainly email that across to Emma after this meeting, just to clarify that particular item, for example. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay. Andy picked up a couple of the things I wanted to ask. So my last question is, or comments, is relating to the public consultation. Offhand, Emma, do you happen to know how much the equivalent process cost with the Junction 34 for the public consultation? Was it a similar kind of figure of 20 grand?
I don't know offhand, I'll be honest with you, but we would be, for the stage 2+ we've just done for Junction 34, I would have said it would have been in that region. We had a lot of comments back, so there was quite a bit of work done by the team for the report, which is due to go to Cabinet now on that matter on 22nd of March. But I would say in that region, maybe more for Junction 34, because we did a bit of trial with virtual rooms and consultation rooms. So we've tried out things there. So the cost would be slightly less for this because we've already done those trials. But 20,000 would seem reasonable to me for a consultation, assuming there isn't thousands of responses.
Did we pay for that, or did we ask for Welsh Government funding for that?
No, Junction 34 is fully funded by Welsh Government.
Sure. Okay, fine. So that really leads me to my last thing, which is perhaps a recommendation I wouldn't mind putting forward. I totally understand what you're saying about the pressures on your budget, and hats off to you for applying to the Welsh Government to find funding for this if we possibly can. I'm not sure how optimistic you are of them providing that money, but as a recommendation, as far as to go back to Cabinet from this meeting, if they were to say no, it seems like a small amount of money at which to get stuck at this stage for a scheme as important and strategically to this. So I'd like to propose a recommendation that should they decline that money, we would recommend Cabinet finds the funding from within the council budgets to pay for that public consultation. Because as I said before, I think it would be a travesty if we didn't take this scheme any further for the sake of £20,000, having spent so much getting this far and so much time and effort and energy to get to this stage. I think that would seem sensible if I had a seconder.
I'll second that. Happy to second that.
Right, who's seconding it? Was it Councillor Robertson?
Andy Robertson, I think, got in there as well. He's a past councillor too.
All right, well, we'll keep that a moment, because I've got a couple more speakers, so we will.
Sure. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Right, I'm going to bring in Councillor Vince Driscoll now. Vince.
Yes, got you, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Just a quick question for Matthew. In the Mary Harriers roundabout scheme, there was a 1A and a 1B. 1A involved knocking down the Mary Harriers. Did 1B involve knocking Mary Harrier down as well? They both.
Yes, yeah, they both options are relatively similar. They both require knocking down the Mary Harrier junction, which obviously would be quite a big impact. And but to create the space that we needed to get our transport team looking at the capacity issues at that junction, that was the sacrifice that was needed to kind of widen the lanes and get the right number of lanes at that junction. So yes, both 1A and B require the route.
Is there not an angle to come the other side and maybe by a couple of houses on the left as you're coming from Cardiff?
The team did look at that at all options. They were constrained by the adopted boundary of the highway, and yes, the pub was the biggest sacrifice in that respect. So it was quite a detailed assessment that the highways team completed on that junction. Like I say, defacing with Mike Clogg and Emma's team as well.
There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion on the junction, and it did take a while for us to come to a determination on it, didn't it? To be fair, Matthew.
It did, yeah. Quite a few conversations back and forth. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Vince. I'm going to bring in Councillor Ruba Sivianian. Ruba, if you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. I think as people know on this committee, I'm opposed to a bypass on the basis that I think we should be looking at other options, around improving connectivity, transport, and everything else. But I do have a question, Matthew, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's really going back to what Councillor Bailey was referring to around the improvements to employment opportunities and so on. So do you envisage those happening within the Vale of Glamorgan, or are we talking about, because it doesn't really specify that in the report, so are we looking at people getting out of the Vale of Glamorgan more easily, out of Dinas more easily for employment opportunities, or are we talking about an improvement within the Vale?
It's a bit of both, really. I mean, there's certainly a benefit to the residents of Dinas Powys in terms of removing all that traffic from Cardiff Road through the town itself, through the village itself, as well as those who are coming from, say, Barry, for example, heading towards Cardiff. It's considering that improved connectivity through that transport corridor itself for those living within and travelling through the corridor, and the benefits that these enhancements and these interventions could potentially provide. So it's a combination of the two, really, to try and answer your question there. And that kind of, like I said, the diversion of trips away from Cardiff Road onto the new bypass, then supported by the sustainable trips and the public transport enhancements as well that could be realised if you had the combined option taken forward.
Okay, Ruba.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got no other committee members wishing to speak, but I've got Councillor Lisbonette who would like to ask a question as a ward member. And then following that, then, if we've got no other questions from committee members, I'm going to actually bring in Councillor Peter King, who is the cabinet member who wants to speak as well. So, Councillor Burnett, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must be honest, I'm not, as you know, this isn't my area, and rightly so. The research to date has focused primarily on the users of that stretch of road. But the one thing that seems to cause problems for any local authority is unintended consequences. And in terms of this, where people in my ward, which is the Stanwell ward in Penarth, are becoming increasingly concerned, is the consequences in terms of congestion and travel through their area. I should imagine people going along Windsor Road or that area would be feeling the same. People in my ward that live around the Dinas Road junction who are really unhappy about the prospect of a junction there. And I just wonder, at what point in all this research would it be looking into the knock-on impact on the other people in the surrounding area? And for that, I would say basically anybody that lives in Penarth.
Okay, well,
do you want me to come back on that? Do you want me to come back on that to start with? Thank you for the question, Councillor Bennett. It's a really good one, because obviously any scheme isn't just about the community that it's within. It's also about the impacts that it has on surrounding communities, and that's particularly the case with any form of transport improvement. So on the review group, we did have a representative from Penarth Town Council who did come in and I think probably expressed similar concerns that you've expressed tonight, and obviously we've said that if we get the funding and if we go through to the next stage, then our consultation would be wider, much wider than just Dinas Powys. It would be obviously Penarth and probably back to Barry and other areas as well. So I think it would be at the next stage they could have their full voice heard about what they felt about the proposals. But Penarth Town Council have been quite vocal on the review group as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Emma. Right, Councillor Bailey, you've put your hand up again to speak.
It was kind of just to come back on what Liz was just saying there, and it's a fair point that she makes about raising the issue of how the project will affect residents in Penarth. Obviously, I'm also a member of the steering group from the point of view of being a Barry Town councillor, and there's a strategic wider benefit, I would argue, and we've said this quite a few times, between improving links for Barry residents to the capital city from an economic point of view, and because it will benefit them in terms of road times too. So hopefully when that does get to stage 3, that's also given an even greater focus as well, because I think that could have huge strategic benefits for Wales's biggest town.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Right, Councillor Vince Driscoll, did you want to quickly come in as well? No?
Yeah, yes, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. In response to Councillor Bennett, the roundabout that's going to replace the traffic lights, a 2-lane roundabout with priority to the right, will give those cars coming down from Meadowlands Road a greater access through. And I thought that would be a much better, that'd be a benefit to Penarth, compared to what's happening now. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Bennett, did you just want to respond to that?
Yeah, I did. I asked a question. I'm not proposing anything, and I don't need it clarified. I'll wait until the time, Chair, when we actually have the full information. I had questions from from residents in my ward that I passed on. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Peter King, who's the Cabinet member. So Peter, you've waited very patiently, thank you. So did you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. A few comments that I feel I need to contribute. With regard to Mr. Harrod, I reported to Cabinet that he had contacted me not very late at night, but just before Cabinet. And whilst Cabinet rejected his comments, because we argued that the decision, as you've already said, had already been taken, was almost historic, I did say to Cabinet that I would pass his note on to your chair. And I replied to him saying the same thing. So that is the reason it's come to you, is because I promised I would do just that. So that was really what I thought you needed to know. In terms of the public consultation and cost, I think someone's going to make me wince shortly, possibly burst into tears, because back in 2016, I was the then cabinet member who pushed for the well-tagged stage 1 to look at a Dinas Powys bypass. And I've been eroding neighbourhood services and transports reserves ever since, and that's really why I'm saying please can we go back to Welsh Government and ask for a bit more money, because whilst I agree that 20k is not a great deal in the overall scale of the council, it's another 20k on top of a perishing fortune that's come out of neighbourhood services and transport reserves. And I'm pleading with you. Yes, all right, that's your recommendation, but I'm pleading with you. You know, let the grant go ahead. And you know, I desperately hope Welsh Government fund it, because I'm terrified that it'll come out of our reserves. So that was that. The couple of the comments that Councillor Robertson made, I'm a little bit concerned by, because he talks about looking at an additional connection to Dinas Powys Road, and my fear is this will never ever get beyond well-tagged stage 2+, because if we keep on adding more and more bits, and I got the distinct impression that the view a couple of years ago was, can we please conclude some work for a Dinas Powys bypass, and that's really what we're trying to do, is to look at a Dinas Powys bypass, which is partly why the longer route was scrapped. And I think it's you know, when we talk about burial grounds and it being relatively interesting to sort of excavate them for an archaeological point of view, yeah, I agree, although that does add considerably to the cost. But it was only last week that I was being told that we shouldn't be pursuing with another well-tag project because it involved ancient woodlands, and that yet when it's an ancient burial ground, I'm sort of being told. So I would urge you to just not add too much more to it. And it's the thing about electric, talking about taking into account electric cars emissions and things, because if we're going to constantly keep on thinking ahead, I might throw in that if we go to all electric cars, and if we get to 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, both of which are now actually foreseeable, then it may not be a problem to carry on driving through Dinas Powys, because there won't be the fumes, and everybody will be driving much slower. So I'm disinclined to keep adding a great deal more to it. I think as far as the Mary Harry is concerned, it is a massive constraint, but if you're not familiar with the location, there's a levels problem, and I think if you start looking at coming the other way, although there may only be 2 or 3 domestic residences in question, there would be significant ground to make up and all sorts of other issues. So I'm guessing the team looked at that, and that's one of the things they wrestle with. And then really coming back to the Councillor Burnett's comment, I think that's the whole purpose of going to well-tag 3, is you start looking at the detail, and you start looking at the other consequences, and you look at the further modelling. So I'm perfectly comfortable at the moment with where we are, and I would urge you not to press too much to spend more reserves, and allow the report to go forward as it was, which is a request from Welsh Government. But it's your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Right, Councillor Robertson, did you want to come back just very briefly, because we've had an hour discussion on this. We've had a good discussion, but I really want to start wrapping this up now and come to our recommendations. So do you just want to come in very briefly?
Very quickly, I just wanted to ask Peter if he was sure that the archaeological site that's been referred to is actually a burial ground, and burial grounds get dug up during the course of these things anyway. Look at 5 Mile Lane. I can't remember exactly how many burials were excavated there in the end, but it was a considerable number. I believe the site at the end of Dennis Road is actually a medieval defended manor anyway. But I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Robertson.
If you let me answer it, I think Andy makes a perfectly valid point, and I think that's the whole idea. Is if we go on to Well Tag 3, these are the things that get themselves drawn in and explored. But I mean, my gut instinct would be try and get this next bit first. And if you then want to connect up with somewhere else, well, you're just adding to further and more and more complications. So I'm inclined to take one step at a time myself, but your decision.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very fair and valid health warning around this. Now, Councillor Bailey, you had another recommendation, and bearing in mind now what Councillor King has said.
I heard what he said, and I totally respect where he's coming from. And I said the same to Emma at the time. It'd be unfortunate if we had to find this money from depleting resources. However, this has gone on as far as it has already. I'm fully supportive of the application going into Welsh Government, but as far as committee goes, I don't see how it would do any harm at all for us to say as a committee that we think that it can't fall for the sake of £20,000. So the recommendation stands as far as I'm concerned. Whilst taking into consideration what he said, I don't see how that changes the need for us to say that we need to push this forward.
Right. Would you like to repeat?
So effectively, let me have a look. I did write it down.
I'm going to take that recommendation separately to the others, because the others are more about noting as that as well. So I think we need to vote on that separately.
Sure. So it's just supporting the application for funding for the public consultation. But if the Welsh Government should refuse to provide that funding, we should find the resources to undertake public consultation, because we do not feel as a committee that the project should stop for the sake of £20,000 with so much having been spent already.
Okay.
And so much hard work having been put in.
Right, actually, I'm looking at the recommendation. Actually, I think we need to take particularly number 2 first before we actually move on to that one. Because if we don't agree number 2,
yeah, sure,
would fall anyway. So are we all just happy to note the progress made on there, which is recommendation 1? Is everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then the second one is that subject to Welsh Government providing local transport grant funding in 2021-22. The project is taken forward for completion of a 12-week statutory public consultation exercise prior to a decision being taken by the Vale of Glamorgan Council to progress to a well tag stage 3 study. Are we all happy to agree that?
Yeah.
Yep. And then obviously the third recommendation is that we've considered this at our committee, which we've done that anyway. So, right. So we have got that fourth recommendation. I, for one, have got grave concerns around that, because I do think our reserves are depleted, and I'm not sure what further depletion is actually going to have to take place. Simply
£20,000.
It is, but £20,000.
How much have we spent so far?
Wrong way. So I think what I'd like to do is actually take a vote on that recommendation, if we're all happy to do that. So Gareth, did you want to?
Yes, do a roll call, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah, if we can do a roll call, right.
Okay.
Councillor Robertson, I've got your hand up, but I really do want to take this now to a vote. Okay. Okay. So
my
Gareth,
hand's up just to vote. Sorry, I was voting for it.
Okay.
I'll take my hand down.
Being organised there. Well done. Okay. Right. Okay. Gareth, did you want to do a roll call for the vote?
Thanks, Charles. Start with yourself. So, Councillor Brooks, are you for or against the proposal by Councillor Bailey?
Against.
Okay. Councillor Civil-Narnham, are you for or against the proposal?
Against.
Councillor Bailey, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Drake, are you for or against?
Against.
Councillor Driscoll, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor John, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
Councillor Morgan, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Robertson, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Rowlands, are you for or against? Hello, Councillor Rowlands. Councillor Rowlands, are you there, please?
Leighton, are you there, or can you put it in the message?
I'll phone him now, Chair.
Okay.
Okay,
but,
and
well, there is a question around that. Does how much of the debate did he take part in or listen to? Is he just lost signal?
I think he's just lost signal. Yeah, right. That's what I'm just trying to find out now.
Okay.
Can I get Councillor William, are you for or against the proposal? Hello, Councillor William.
He's just reconnecting the internet. He should be in a second. Leighton Rowlands is.
Okay, we lost Stefan as well, by the look of it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, Leighton.
Ah, yeah, I'm still here.
Right, okay. Gareth, did you want to?
Yeah, Councillor Rowlands, have you heard the proposal from Councillor Bailey?
Yes, I vote in favour of the proposal.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We've got no luck reconnecting with Councillor William? No? Okay.
Not yet, Chair.
Right, okay, so if I've done my maths right, that's 7 for and 3 against. Okay.
It's 6 for, 3 against, with Councillor William as an abstention.
Right, okay, that's lovely. Right, okay then. Well, that obviously moves forward then to back to Cabinet. So I'd like to thank everybody for, it's been a long discussion. Thank you, Emma, for your work around that, and also thank you very much, Matthew. I think your input there tonight has given us a great assistance, I think, in actually understanding a very, very complicated report. So thank you very, very much for that. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your time as well. Thank you.
And
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, Matt, if you did want to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're more than welcome, but I'm assuming no.
I might leave now. Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the agenda, item number 5 then, which is the revenue and capital monitoring for the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of January 2021. So Matthew Sewell this time. Over to you.
You go. Another Matthew, 2 Matthews.
Another Matthew.
Yeah, sorry. So the report is the revenue and capital monitoring to the end of January 21. And the recommendation of the report is that that the position is noted with regard to the revenue and capital budget. The report, as always, has a table at the start showing our projected outturn against our budgets for this year. The projected overspend against neighbourhood and transport services has increased to £1 million. And we're still projecting also a overspend against our building cleaning services, building maintenance and cleaning services of 815,000. Both of these to be funded from our reserves. So the reason for the increase in the neighbourhood and transport services overspend is due to the current rollout of the Barry phase of recycling. There's been an increased spend on transport costs because for a period of time we've got the new vehicles, starting paying for the new vehicles, and we've still got the old vehicles, and we're decommissioning those and sending those off to auction. But there is a period where we've got a bit of a duplication of costs. Hopefully, once the transfer station is up and running, which is proposed for next year at some point, this should reduce our overall transport costs. As at the moment, we're dropping the majority of our waste into Cardiff, and we've also got the temporary transfer station in Cowbridge. But obviously, it's still a fair distance to go with our waste from Barry. Another reason for the overspend is the additional staff costs that we've had through COVID. However, some of those have been picked up by Welsh Government, but we also paid our staff a 10% uplift in salary for April to August, just for the waste staff, that was. However, this wasn't funded from Welsh Government, and we've also had increased spend on treating our recycling, mainly the commingled recycling, which we're still doing in Penarth and Dinas, and obviously we were doing in Barry up until October. So the cost of that has escalated over recent years, which is one of the reasons why we're moving to separated recycling, to hopefully bring that cost down. The report then goes on to look at building services, and we've mentioned previously, but the main reason for the deficit on building services is the reduction in the level of work that they're undertaking. Majority of work done by building maintenance is on council houses, so responsive maintenance mainly to council houses, to repairs, and during the sort of lockdown periods during COVID, we'd mainly be doing just emergency repairs in people's houses. So obviously that's massively reduced the amount of work they're doing. However, we're still obviously paying our staff, so they're still being paid, but obviously we're getting less money from recharging housing for the work undertaken. So that has led to a deficit in that area. The report then goes on to look at capital budgets. So, and the Appendix 2 shows the progress up to the end of January. I'll just mention a few of the bigger schemes that have been added to the capital budget, or to be carried forward in the budget. Penarth Esplanade, we actually brought money forward for that into this financial year to do resurfacing works along Penarth Esplanade, which I think is now completed. It was 150,000. We've had money for road safety scheme, 20-mile-an-hour scheme in St Bride's Major, 76,000 from Welsh Government funding. That's been added to the budget. Excuse me. Eastern Shelter over Barry Island, resurface of the roof. Work there has started. However, 80,000 to be carried forward to next year. The street lighting energy reduction strategy, which has been on the capital programme for quite a while. We're looking into the possibility of reducing the budget for that scheme. Over the years, the costs of LED lights have come down. So initially we had a budget of nearly 2.3 million for that scheme. However, we're looking to reduce that down to just over 1.6 million. And the potential of Salix funding the whole scheme, and we then pay back over a number of years. But the initial budget included a contribution from the council, so hopefully that's no longer needed, and Salix will fund the whole project. And then it's a 0% interest loan effectively, and we pay back over, I think, 7 years. And then one other to mention is quite a big table in the report, showing the budgets for the Thematic Grants programme, and their works to Holton Road and High Street. And there's a table in there to show the budgets proposed for those schemes. So is there any questions on the report? I can take them now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I mean, obviously, this is a very informative report. There are, some quite serious constraints there, particularly on those pressures that COVID from over this last year, which are unavoidable. but also it's still there, and we're still going to have those pressures going forward as well. Before I just open it up to other members, I just wondered if it would be beneficial to the committee really about having a bit of an update report around the street lighting strategy, the energy reduction strategy. It's quite obviously it is quite some time before or since this actually started, you know, and progress has been going on, but I do think it's been quite some time, and it may be beneficial, and probably this one for you, Emma, is whether it'd be beneficial to the committee to just have an update report at some meeting in the future.
Yeah, I'm happy to facilitate that, Chair.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. I got one speaker now. It's Councillor Gwyn John. Gwyn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I completely support you, Chairman. This has been hanging around now for many, many years. I was a cabinet member when this first started, so I completely agree. We should have an update report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gwyn. Councillor Vince Driscoll, do you have a question?
A couple, actually. Matthew, what effect do you think it'll have on the price of recycling products when, well, the recycled waste, I mean, when everybody in the country is doing exactly what we're doing? That's one question. The other question is, what are thematic grants? I've obviously missed something somewhere. And the third one is what you just mentioned then, Chair, with the street lighting strategy, in view of what's been happening in London lately, and the protests about, you know, the murder, etc., and women walking alone at night, do you think it's prudent that we, and actually I don't know whether we still do or not, turn off any street lighting at night? And if so, do you think it's time to review that policy? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you there, Vince. Emma, did you want to just respond to the turning off of lights?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So all of the lights that we're turning to LED won't be subject to the nighttime restriction. So it's really important that we get this final phase of the main road LED out and done, because then there's unlikely to be those lights switched off. But I think the key part is for me is in residential areas, and the rollout of LED into residential areas is complete, and as such most of the lights are now on within those areas. So I don't know if there's a particular concern of the member that's raised it, but obviously there is a map on the website that tells you if any are still subject to nighttime restriction, but I'm happy to take a separate conversation with the member if there's a particular lights that they're concerned about.
Okay.
Can I come back in there, Chair?
Yes, sure.
No, there was nothing in particular, Emma. I just it was just mentioned to me recently, and I wondered if we still had that policy of turning off lights, and if so, I think even if there are main road areas, maybe we could consider turning them back on until the LED rollout is finished. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Emma.
It is quite late as well. Sorry, when the nighttime, it is quite late. It's not allowed for what I call the nighttime economy. So the recent high-profile case, I think the lady was walking back, wasn't she, at about 9 o'clock at night? Our lights would still be on then. It's after midnight and before 6, if there are any still at part nighttime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to emphasise that these are just on the main highways at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, so the programme and the report that you would receive would be on the main road, so the big columns, big main road ones, and that's what that programme is for, rolling out. As I say, I know we've procured it now, and we've done some trials on different types of lamps. We've had a look at a number of things, but we're there or thereabouts now, and I would hope to see that on site very shortly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Emma. As I said, if we could just have that update report, I think.
Yes, Chair. I think that's fair comment.
Yeah, and just Vince has raised a very valid point there, and whether that could just form part of that reassurance to our public as well.
So what I'll do is I'll do two things. I'll put the in the chat. I'll put the nighttime light map that's on the web so that members can see, but I'll also check that there's a part on that report to explain quite fully if there is any or what nighttime lights are still activated, if that makes sense.
That's lovely, thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Sorry, Chair, Councillor Driscoll has a couple of other questions that we haven't answered.
He put his hand down.
The effect of recycling.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Increased recycling on the prices. Yes, we probably will see a drop in the prices that we're getting eventually for the material once our neighbouring authorities go a similar way. We've already seen with plastic, it's already dropped since we started separating it out. It's already dropped 80% in the price we were getting. Now that's probably due to further countries stopping taking recycling, and therefore the overall cost of plastic going down. But yeah, we have already seen a drop, so we would expect it, I would have thought, for other materials as well. And then the last one was thematic grants. I'm not sure if Marcus, do you know a little bit more about the thematic grants programme?
Is this in respect to the town centres?
Yes, town centre regeneration, I think, yeah. Yeah,
well, what's happened obviously with the thematic grants over the pandemic is the money has been taken out of grant. There is still the money that was committed to grants has been paid, but the remainder of the money that hadn't been committed has been put into supporting all the town centres in the Vale. That's been done right across the Cardiff capital region by all of the councils. That will continue into this financial year coming to support wider projects around town centres, albeit we will be hoping to return to a more focused grant programme around properties, but at the moment there's very little demand for it. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thanks, Marcus.
Okay, has that answered your question, Vince? Yeah. Lovely. Right, okay. Do we have any other questions? No? All right. Well, I think members are happy to note your recommendation in that we've considered your report. So thank you very much, Matthew, for that. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, we'll move on to item number 6 then, which is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q3 performance 2021. 2021. I think it's over to, it's going to be a double show between Marcus and Emma, so I'm not sure who's going to speak first.
Marcus is kindly offered to take it this evening, so
I'll go through the report,
answer any questions. Yeah.
Okay, over to you then, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very quickly. Obviously, this report is a report which covers the whole of the annual monitoring report for the council. As we go through the report, you'll see it does section off and focus on those matters which are covered by this scrutiny committee. Obviously, as a report, it is heavily influenced, as others have been, by the pandemic and by what we've managed to deliver being affected by that pandemic. And the report itself is given overall status of amber in the Q3. Out of that plan, 70% of the planned activities in the annual delivery plan have been attributed green performance, which is positive progress being made. 24% have been attributed, which is 55 actions have been attributed red status. This is the overall plan, I would add, not those specifically related to this scrutiny committee. And of the 55 actions attributed red performance status during the quarter, 91% or 50 of them were directly as a result of service reprioritization measures, terrible, undertaken in response to the impact to the ongoing pandemic. Work is now commencing, as it says, in respect of recovery plans and strategy moving forward, but again, that obviously has an issue in as much as it does affect where some of these teams' attention is focused. So moving down the plan, of the 64 quarterly performance measures aligned to our corporate wellbeing objectives, data was reported for 38 measures where performance was applicable. 68% or 26 were green, 8% amber, and 24 or 9 were red status. And then obviously there are other measures up to 118 which are not applicable to quarterly reporting. So coming down to the actual activities related to this scrutiny committee, 78% or 40 out of 51 were green, 6% or 3 were amber, and 16 or 8 were given red status. And of the 9 given a red status, the impact of COVID-19 was identified as a contributory factor in all of them in reporting slippage. Of the 9 quarterly reported measures, 5 were attributed green, 2 amber, and the remaining 2 were reported red, which are we'll come on to. So just so members understand, this report is quite long, or what it refers to, the annual delivery plan is quite a long document. That actually can be found in Appendix A and details all the performance in some detail if members want to go through that. I won't do that if they at this stage, because that's quite a long process. What I will do is take members to Appendix B. And would members like me to share this? Would that be useful on the screen, or are members happy they can actually see it using their own computers? What would be better, Chair?
Yeah, could you share it?
I will share it, yes.
Yeah.
No problem at all. So hopefully you can see that, which is the graphic of the annual delivery monitoring report. And this again goes through what we've achieved, obviously identifying the overall plan as amber. In this section at page 3, we've tried to identify what's been achieved, what the successes have been through this particular quarter. And you'll see here issues in Objective 1, we're working with our communities. We've consulted with the communities on developer contributions around Bellevue Park, Wembo Community Library and Hub, and the multi-use games area at Wick and Arcot Triangle project. Other key areas in Objective 2, support learning and employment with economic growth. We've seen the first zero net carbon primary school in Wales constructed, the Llancarbon Primary School. We've seen the council granted over £1 million to support decarbonisation and deliver and for additional funding has been allocated to deliver a net zero primary school at Cowbridge. In terms of Objective 3, a new multi-use games area has commenced at Wick Playing Fields, and there are a number of other schemes under development. Finally, in respect of Objective 4, we've got the key figure of 71% of household waste was prepared for reuse and or recycled, exceeding the statutory target of 64%. Of course, all of this is being done through the middle of a pandemic and a lockdown. Then if you move down, which hopefully you can see on page 4, this just goes through the various actions and measures, identifying obviously 40 or 78% of the actions are green, and 5 measures or 56% are green. Obviously, we have the amber. There's 3 and 2 in amber, and then finally in red we have those actions, 8 actions and 2 measures. And just for members' attention, if you click on that, you are taken directly to the various issues which are shown as being red, and you'll see that in this particular case, in reference to this scrutiny committee, you'll see the various actions there. I won't go through them all in detail. If members have got anything to raise, they can raise those at the end of the meeting. Some of the issues have been discussed previously. So I'll just go back there. Apologies. Let me go back to Appendix B. Let's jump around a bit. There we go. So we're back here. And again, if you click on item 2 there, the measures, you will get the list of red items under measures. I'll do that just for clarity. And those are shown again there. It is the various items underneath. I think you have to go to the bottom and you get measures, performance indicators. So those are the two at the bottom, which is the fly tipping and percentage of street lights that are LED. So apologies, I will go back again and have to flick to Appendix B again.
Chair, sorry, Marcus. I don't have anything on my screen. I just got a blank window. I don't know if everybody else.
Does anyone else have that?
I can see it.
No,
Marcus.
I can see it perfectly well.
No, mine's on the screen.
Yeah, mine's fine as well. Sorry, Andy, I don't.
Yeah, mine's okay.
I'm not. I'm not very IT literate. I'm sorry. I'm obviously done something wrong.
You should just come up, Andy. Just
yeah, I know, but all I've got is I've got a blank grey window page.
Oh.
Oh dear.
I don't know what's happened there. Have you got the report in front of you though to read?
I'll go to the report.
Yeah,
go to the report. If you open Appendix B of the report, Andy, you can see, Councillor, you can see the you can see where we are. We're on Appendix B and we're on page 4 of Appendix B. About to go down to page 5. So if I come to page 5, is that okay? There we go. Great. And this is the area where we identify here the areas where obviously we've identified improvement is needed. That's very clearly showing those areas. And if I go through them just really quickly, picking out 1 or 2 areas. So in terms of objective 1, we've got clubs and organisations that have been unable to generate income during the pandemic, and this has presented a significant barrier to any potential transfer of assets. And so that work has been severely affected. Works to progress an interchange at Barry Docks has slipped due to delays to gaining Network Rail and Transport for Wales approvals, and also delays in surveying sites due to the various lockdowns caused during the pandemic. In Objective 3, we've one area here that's been affected as the pandemic has hindered us from employing an activity-based officer to expand opportunities for physical activity at the country parks. But footfall has increased due to obviously the country parks being a very welcome place to go during the pandemic and during the lockdown. And we have completed some additional parking facilities. And then in terms of Objective 4, the other area, well, I'll just pick one, which is the work to review and implement strategies to improve air quality around schools has slipped as a result of the pandemic. But trees have been delivered to schools for planting in March, and we have made good progress in the biodiversity strategy. So you'll see that in all of those areas, there have been areas for improvement identified, but we are working to overcome them. And as I said previously, in all cases, in terms of the those directly relevant to this scrutiny committee, the pandemic has been cited as a reason why we have slipped. And then on page 5, you'll see there that we have a coronavirus recovery update identifying what we're doing to try and move out of the current situation. Again, I won't work through that in detail. If anyone's got any questions, perhaps they can ask them at the end. And then finally, just to explain, I've clicked onto the Appendix C. Appendix C just identifies those areas which are I drew attention to previously, which are the exceptions. So I think that's about it in terms of the report. I don't know, I shall stop sharing the screen, and if anyone wants to ask any questions around the improvement plan.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. I mean, considering the last year we've had around the pandemic, I think the report is actually a testament to the amount of work that our staff have put into keeping things going as far as they possibly can. Obviously, COVID does impact on lots of those services, as been highlighted. But I do think we should put on record our thanks and support. I know we have done it previously, but obviously COVID is still ongoing, and the impact is going to will continue for quite some time. I'm convinced of that one. So I've got no particular questions myself. The only one I will just refer to is the Disabled Facilities Grant. I know I raised it last night in Homes and Safer Communities with yourself, Marcus. Just a thought of the committee to bear in mind that obviously working on disabled facility grants has not been able to take place. You've got a variety of reasons. One is contractors. Two, people are understandably apprehensive and nervous about letting people into their homes, particularly as most people who require the disabled facility grants are our more vulnerable residents. But I was reassured that Marcus did say that he's actually raised this at that higher level just to keep this on the table, because what I'm concerned about is once things start moving, then we're going to be hit with an absolute deluge of work or grants to be applied for and actually really carried out, and it's around that contingency and how much you're going to be able to cope with that. So I said I did raise that in Homes and Safer Communities last night. So I don't know if anybody else has got any other questions or comments around the report. No? There you are, you've stunned them all into silence, Marcus.
I did. Just to close on that, and it's probably picked up in the report. I didn't highlight it. One thing I did want to highlight was the sterling work of both the teams in Regen and Council Tax in delivering grants to businesses who've been struggling through the pandemic. A lot of the work, certainly in my area, has been affected because they've had to put just down tools on their normal stuff and just focus on delivering those grants to ensure that businesses survive and get through the pandemic. So, my heartfelt thanks goes to the teams who are doing that and continue to do it in both areas. And it's amazing how much money has been given out to business and continues to be given out to business. So just to say, just a little message there. I probably didn't pick up on that in the report, but it is fantastic work that's going on.
Thank you, Marcus. I fully agree with that. I think there's a lot of small businesses out there now who wouldn't, and the medium-sized business wouldn't actually be looking to a future for their business without those grants and that support. So thank you for that. Right, Councillor John, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to endorse Marcus's comments. I mean, they've been fantastic, the staff on this, and I would like particularly to mention Phil Chappell's contribution. He's kept us all up to date with all the grant aid and everything. Has been absolutely superb in our communities. So well done. I think it's absolutely fantastic, the work that's been done.
Okay, thank you, Gwyn. And again, I think as a committee, we can wholeheartedly agree with that. We've got 3 recommendations on page 3. So are we all happy to agree those recommendations?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely, yeah. Thank you. Right, we'll move.
Chair, could you tell Marcus not to lean back? He'll be in trouble.
That's very true. Sorry, I lost myself in my camera and my sound. Yeah, I would like to know, Marcus, it's nice and sunny there and it's not here, it's dark. But right, we'll move quickly on then to the last item. And again, I think, is this yourself, Marcus, as well, the service?
Yes, yeah, I drew the short straw with this one, so I'll go through that one if you don't mind, Chair.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this is just a report highlighting the service plans that have been prepared in respect of the 2 key departments that report to the E&R committee, and obviously in relation to the annual delivery plan, improvement plan. It sets out the specific service plans and targets within the remit of the Scrutiny committee and the specific areas of focus. As part of this year's delivery and on what we're delivering out of the corporate plan. Just to explain this, because it can be a little bit daunting, this report does include an Appendix A, the actual service plans for the various the two main departments, if you like, that are reporting into this this committee. The service plans can be found in Appendix B. Sorry, Appendix A, I should say, pages, and they are, I'm just going through it now. Neighbourhood Services Report starts at page 106 of the list there, because you have in front of you all the service plans for the council. So just to explain that, and as part of that service plan, the risks are identified at a page, or the main risk to the service, and that neighbourhood services, is identified at page 126. So I mean, I won't go through those. If anyone's got any questions around those, please do ask after we've finished going through the report. Planning and regen, or regen and planning, is identified at page 193 of the report. And again, the risks identified in association with that service plan can be found at page 211. So just to explain where you can find the service plans as part of this process. Then also at Appendix B, so that was Appendix A. Appendix B are all the various service or wellbeing objectives, I should say targets attached to the wellbeing objectives of the corporate plan. And if you, just to explain this process, if you look at that and open up the that appendix, you can see by looking at the final column, it says Scrutiny Committee, and you should be able to identify the relevant actions which are relevant to this Scrutiny Committee. And I will take you just to explain that to you. They are identified at page 233 or 232 to 233 of that particular part. And you'll see all the various items. Again, I won't go through them because I mean, bore you all silly, but you'll see there are various service targets there. And then finally, Appendix C of the report includes, again, the service plans relevant to this Scrutiny Committee. And in that appendix, each of the service plan actions are identified with both the annual delivery plan references and priorities and the strategic recovery priorities. So you can look at the service plan actions and look at the, again, where they fit in. So for example, if I pick one of Emma's, the first one on that list is involve, engage and consult our residents and other stakeholders, including the voluntary sector and town and community councils, in redesigning food risk management, trees, transport, active travel service, and ensuring that those who are seldom heard have opportunities to be involved. That is a priority identified in the annual delivery plan at ADP02 and in the strategic recovery priorities at SRP19. So if you go through each of those, you can look, it identifies which service plan they are in, and obviously the various plans, both the annual delivery plan and the recovery plan. So hopefully I've tried to do my best to explain how you can work your way through the various reports. I don't know if anyone has any questions on those service plans, essentially the two that both Emma and I prepare for our various service areas.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Does anybody have any questions around the service plan? I know that the agenda has been a lot of heavy reading for this evening's meeting, but there's a lot of useful information there as well. So does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Well, we got two recommendations. The first one is that we review and endorse a recommendation to Cabinet, the service plans, which are in Appendix A, and all planned activities as they relate to the remit of this committee, which is in Appendix C, as Marcus has highlighted there. And then the second one is that members review and endorse via recommendation to Cabinet the proposed service improvement targets for 2021-2022, which are in Appendix B, which relates again to the remit of this committee. And again, Marcus has highlighted and gone through those. So are we all happy to agree those recommendations?
Yep.
Yes?
Happy.
Yep.
Happy.
Happy.
Lovely. Okay, thank you all very much. Well, thank you both for Marcus and for Emma for that input with those two reports as well. That's, oh, I've lost my you know, I've got so much paper and I've actually lost my agenda. Right, I think that I've got no other items on the agenda. No other urgent items. I've got nothing under part 2. So I'd like to close the meeting and thank everybody for attending tonight. And look forward to seeing you all then at the next meeting in April. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, Chair.
Chair, before you shut the meeting down, could I ask Emma a quick question if she's got 2 seconds? Or is that going to be, if you've not got time? It's just a very quick question of clarification, Emma, if I may.
Was it related to the meeting?
Yeah, it was related to the item, and it's just something so I can understand the implications myself. It was just to do with the recommendation I put forward about paying for the consultation. I put a question in the chat, but I appreciate you might not have seen that. I just wanted to understand, so all of those measures that were going forward to public consultation, so recommendation 2 from the report, if for hypothetically speaking, the Welsh Government hadn't found the funds to pay for that to go to public consultation, if we opted not to pay for that from council reserves, that would therefore, all of those things are bound up in that report, aren't they? So that's not just the bypass, we're talking about the cycle routes, the walk routes, the upgrades to transport infrastructure. Everything is all being considered and must go to public consultation that's in that WellTag process so far, isn't it? So if we stopped at this stage, it's not just about the bypass, it's about all those other things not being able to go to public consultation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bypass would be the main part of it, because there are other consultations related to active travel. There's obviously other work happening with TfW and other projects ongoing, particularly in terms of public transport, etc. So I think the main, by not going to consultation, I would say the main impact would be on the bypass. I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry, and apologies, I didn't see the chat.
No, that's okay. I mean, I appreciate it would be the main thing that would.
Yeah,
would
the other things I think. The other things I think would be taken forward maybe by other measures. So, for example, we've got an active travel consultation on at the moment. All the cycling and walking could feed through there. We've got obviously doing work with TfW, so the rail station improvements, etc., could feed through there. So the main, I'm not saying it would be all, but the main impact would be on the bypass. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's what.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was looking to understand.
That would be my answer. The main impact would be the bypass.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Emma.
Right,
sorry to keep for longer.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Apologies.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And
right.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
Okay,
sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Right. Okay. So I would like to formally close the meeting. Okay. So thank you all and good night, and we'll see you in April.